Hello, and welcome to another edition of Local Legends, in which we feature local legends in the Monterey County area, and specifically folks that have made a substantial contribution in the arts, in information, in legal areas, and cultural contributions. And we're most pleased to have with us today in the studio a man about town, a most interesting fellow, raconteur, and fellow theater director. And I have always admired your work, and I'm referring, of course, to Walt deFaria, who many of us on the peninsula and actually throughout the county are aware of Walt's wonderful work with the theater, and specifically with young children in our area, exposing them to the theater and all of that goes into making a production. And I know, speaking for the theatrical community, Walt, we're very appreciative of all that you have done for young people. And I know lots of folks know you, but not all of us know about you. And you're a fascinating person. So tell us about Walt deFaria.
Well, where do I start?
As a young'un.
As a young'un. Actually, I've been interested in theater since I was about 7 years old. That was quite a long time ago. We used to, when I was a kid, I used to flip over a card table and hang Christmas tree lights on it, turn on the radio, cut out figures, and do theater. Don't ask me why or how. He says, absolutely no one in my family is connected to the theater, never have been. But it was just something, that happened. But through the years, where did I start, by the way? I mean, that's a typical thing,
Sure.
Where do you begin getting interested in this?
Right.
Well, the first real job I had was as a newsman, because I'd been studying journalism, that sort of thing in high school, for the Music Circus in Sacramento, which was run in those days by a company, Lewis & Young. It was called Lewis & Young's Music Circus. So I got a good chance to just find out what it was all about.
Sure.
But my real job started as a page at CBS some years later. And of course, page is a fancy word for usher, but we're very proud of that. And this was around the time that CBS built what they called Television City. It was the days when there was a big transition from radio to television. And people like Jack Benny would do a radio show in the morning and then do a television show at night. George Burns and Gracie Allen, that sort of thing. Right. In fact, as I used to answer the phone backstage for George and Gracie.
Oh my goodness.
George never spoke to me. Gracie was nice.
Okay.
But so that's really kind of how I started. Eventually, I ended up in a station called KMJ-TV in Fresno. And in those days, not that many people went to school unless you were going to be a cameraman, like a director of photography. USC was terrific for that, or occasionally for other things, but not as many did. So the way you learned the business was to have the opportunity to go to a local station, wherever that might be. Right. In my case, it was in Fresno. Right. And it was an unbelievable experience because we were able in that studio to do live theater because the woman who owned the station believed in it. And we had equipment and stuff that you wouldn't find anywhere else in a typical station. So it was a great on-the-job training kind of thing.
Great.
And from there I moved into Hollywood with a family, trying to make it, but didn't for an awful long time. Ran through an awful lot of money that we'd been saving. And eventually I got a job with Disney. So I worked on the Mickey Mouse Club for a while. They had a newsreel division where they'd send a cameraman out into the woods and he'd photograph whatever, chickens, it really didn't matter. They'd send the film back to you and you sit in front of a moviola, something that doesn't exist today anymore because now you've got all these fancy editing things. And you'd make up stories about whatever footage and that was the newsreel for the Mickey Mouse Club. Eventually that died and I was out of show business again for a while. Eventually got back into it though locally out of Burlingame, California with a company called Lee Mendelson. Now Mendelson is the guy who started the Charlie Brown animation shows. And so I joined him And while I didn't work on the animation, I worked on all the live action shows. And for example, there was a whole series of Snoopy at the Ice Follies and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I produced all those.
Right.
My kids, meanwhile, were some of the early voices on the Charlie Brown Show.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So they had a great experience for them. And my son has since gone on and is now working for Warner Brothers.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, we've started a tradition even if there wasn't one when I started.
I see. So you actually grew up in the Sacramento area?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and you went to the grammar school and
Yep.
high school. And did you have a kind of a theatrical experience in the high school? Did you?
In the high school, we did very little. When I got to college, I did more.
I see.
That was St. Mary's College out of Moraga.
Oh, sure, I know.
Yeah,
St.
and
Mary's,
and even though in those days they didn't even have a theater, we built a theater out of an old. It was Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney. We built a barn.
Okay,
We had a
and
theater and so on.
and-
But that's pretty much where I've learned anything about theater
Right.
in that place.
And that early experience served you well.
Oh,
Later
absolutely.
on, we have to
Absolutely.
make things work in community theater.
Well,
and-
what you learned, of course, is that you have to be totally responsible.
Sure.
You know, and you have to be able to do all these different kinds of jobs.
Sure.
I think one of the big problems that we often run into is that kids, the old story, kids today,
Sure.
but a lot of them feel they don't have to go through any steps, that they're talented, they can sing, they can dance.
Sure.
I'm
sure.
the lead.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
it's really hard to get them to understand that each one of these steps is what's going to make them better.
Right. And now those are the very fortunate ones. Now, unfortunately, in our county, there are very few schools that actually do have theatrical programs, theater programs. And as the Visual and Performing Arts Administrator here, sadly, that is the case. So any of the private concerns, those of which you were involved in, are greatly appreciated, certainly to involve a lot of these youngsters that are not involved. And we know, for example, with the brain research that's going on, we know the effects of the arts on the maturation process. And especially in the theater, there seems to be something about youngsters, Walt, that are not exposed to the theater and their lack of empathetic skills. They just can't empathize with other people. They've not been given that kind of training or that kind of experience. It's amazing, some of the studies that are coming out. So I would say there are pockets in the county, and certainly where we're from, the Monterey Peninsula, there are options for youngsters. But throughout the county, that's an exception, unfortunately,
Really?
not the rule.
Yeah, well, the only positive thing I've done in that direction, I guess, is about 12, no, almost 15 years ago now. I started a series of shows in which kids and we never, if you auditioned, you were in the show.
Sure.
And we wrote the material to take care of it. And we wrote original material. A man named Stephen Tosh wrote the music, and I would write the book and lyrics. And we did a whole series of shows in which kids from all over were able to come in and perform, many of whom had never had experience.
Right.
Some did, of course.
Right.
And
now, I remember some of those shows, and in fact, I think you have some videos that
Yes.
we could show
Yeah.
the viewers. And why don't you talk about a couple of those experiences, and then we can.
all right, well, there's three that they're just samples of the kind of shows we did. One is called Ghost in the Box.
Okay.
And what we found out was that kids love, obviously, ghost stories, mystery stories, whatever. So I wrote this particular one to take advantage of that particular idea. And let's take a look at a clip of it so we get an idea.
Excellent. Let's do that.
Easy there. You'll be fine. But no screaming, promise? Proceed, stay with the others. No screaming now, I mean it.
That hurt!
Love that trick. A stitch in time saves nine.
What?
Never mind. Sorry, had to do it. Relax, I won't bite. Does he always sound like a motorboat?
He's never seen a ghost before. You are a ghost, aren't you?
Yep, my new calling, as it were. I was a stable boy for Box's father. A horse kicked me, and here I am. Hey, why aren't you scared?
I don't scare easily.
Good for you, girl.
But here's talking.
So?
I thought ghosts would be rattled to change and say boo or something.
You've seen too many movies. Think of me as a sort of hip Casper without the cutes. Go soft and get a real long rap, slinking around and looking weary, haunting every corner of the map, in any place that's cold and dreary. I'm a different sort of fellow, with lots of time to spare here. Think of me as being very mellow, with little time to scare here. Come on, gang, back me up on this. Why did you care? Oops, wrong song.
Most interesting. Most interesting, and I remember actually seeing this, and some of my students at Stevenson were actually involved in
yes,
that.
they were.
Yeah.
They were.
And you have a few others.
Oh yeah, I've got two others. One is called "If Wishes Were Horses."
Oh, yeah.
Now, "If Wishes Were Horses," we took a little more serious bent
Right.
for kids, in which we dealt kind of with death or the possibility of death.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that the parents who came up after the show, their reaction was that it was a subject they never liked to talk about at home. And they were appreciative of the fact that we even dealt with it. We dealt with it in a very modest way,
Sure.
but we did deal with it. And well, take a look at this, maybe get an idea of what I'm talking about.
Very good. Let's do that.
We still have a lot of details to work out. Like hanging those Chinese lanterns.
Oh, not to worry. It'll all get done. I only wish Jessica could come.
Glad you brought that up. What about Jessica? What about her? We gotta do something. She can't, go to the dance. So, Jessica can't go. Life is tough, and then you die.
Hey, not funny, you two.
What's the matter, Amy? Jealous of her wheelchair?
Sorry, I was only joking.
Me too. She's my friend, but I have no idea what to do for her. Do you? Typical boy.
She's stuck in bed most of the time, and no one knows if she's ever really gonna get well again. Sometimes life's a pit.
And so's the other option.
Well, let's put our heads together.
They don't call us the drama queens for nothing.
There's got to be a way.
And if you can't think of something, I will.
You're looking a little peaked. You always say that. I'm feeling better. Honest. I'm just bored.
Sorry I asked. It's a mom thing.
I wish I could think of something exciting for you. It's just that it's been months now and nothing seems to change.
You know what the doctor said.
Oh, yes, I know. It's life-threatening, Jessica. Life-threatening. Dweeb. I'm not really that sick. Am I?
You're sick, but you'll get better. I just know it. Now I need to make a phone call. I'll be right back.
Oh, wait, one thing I would like. Sing to me.
Oh, not now. Maybe later.
But I love the song you taught me when I was a little girl. You know, the one you sang when you were young?
It's
Well, that young. It was something about the way it is, life and stuff.
life and stuff. That doesn't ring a bell. Oh, wait, now I remember. That's the way it is.
That's it, that's the one. Well, then sing it with me.
My mom refused to quit when things got out of whack. She said, accept the facts of life and keep a firm straight back. For we live in a world that's big and tall and wide, filled with people struggling side by side.
Okay, back to Walt. We're talking with Walt deFaria here in Local Legends. That's kind of reminiscent in a way of the Red Pony, and I know the Steinbeck Center last year, that was one of their teachable units, was the Red Pony and all of that that's associated with the horse. And one of the things that I was amazed with, Walt, that there are youngsters that live in our county and have never touched a horse. And they actually brought horses in.
Oh, did they
last year,
really?
And some of our youngsters got a chance to go up and
Excellent.
actually, they've of course seen them, but they haven't actually touched them or interacted with them. What's your next one?
Well, the third one that I brought is Kids Love Aliens. They all love aliens, sort of.
Right.
And so this one is called Earth's a Poppin', parenthesis, with aliens. So what we tried to do was do a kind of a kick of a couple of aliens coming down to this world and the contradictions that they run into. And, well, let's look at it.
Okay.
Explorer Zidane.
I'm here, Pops.
Pops, what a disagreeable term. I should never have appointed you to monitor the broadcast from Earth. A little respect, daughter.
You got it.
Give your brother his new DMC. He can study it on your journey together to Earth.
A dual data module communicator. Stellar, prime, all praise, Father. I've always wanted one of my own.
Alpha is not a toy. It is your link with this planet and our link to all that happens to you both while on Earth. Do not ever lose it.
Never. Father, I still see no reason why Zidane should come with me. I can handle this assignment on my own.
No doubt, but I believe you will find your sister's company worthwhile. If memory serves me, you could have used her help while checking out the planet Python.
Boy, could he. That was different. Besides, that planet was not right for our citizens.
No matter. Just think of Zidane as a second eye for your inspection of Earth.
More like a spy than an eye.
Silence! Enough of this. Zidane, have you selected Alpha's earthly name?
Well, it's been difficult. Our transmits from Earth are, of necessity, somewhat shaky. Satellites and radio waves. Can you imagine?
Do not waste my time with excuses.
Not an excuse, Pops. Sorry, Father. Just an explanation. I'm not certain if what we have for him is current.
The name?
Our studies of a transmitter called Nickelodeon something or other demonstrate that he'll be able to assimilate as a friendly visitor if he is called
What?
Bunch.
Bunch.
Bunch. Like bananas?
It's what they call their last name. He also needs a first name.
If you say, and what is that to be?
Brady.
Brady?
Yeah, Brady. His full name on Earth will be Brady Bunch, and I will be called Marcia.
Marcia? Marcia? Marcia?
We could also call you Gilligan.
Bunchy stuff.
Brady and Marcia Bunch. So be it. Is there anything else?
Yes, they have a greeting we must learn.
And what is that?
They hold 2 fingers in the air and they say the word peace. Thus,
Peace.
peace.
Peace. Wishful thinking, according to the research my council has done. It is time you left.
But do we even look like Earthlings?
We will by the time we get there. It's all programmed.
The last time you programmed me for IGO 7, I ended up looking like an intergalactic raccoon. You better be right.
I am right. Before we leave, can we say goodbye to our brothers and sisters? Who knows when we'll see them again?
Yes, you may, but hurry it along.
Well, thank you, Walt. Let's move right along with our local legends on local legend Walt deFaria. One of your projects that I was most fascinated by was the borrowers. Tell us about the borrowers, the background and.
Yeah, well, the background is really interesting, even to me, because I first came upon it. There was a man named Fadiman, Clifton Fadiman, who was a very famous guy, had radio shows and everything. And I worked with him some years, well, back in the 70s, on a project for Encyclopedia Britannica, because he was working with them. Yeah. And he told me there was a book that I ought to look into. And I said, sure, fine. And he got me a script to something called The Borrowers. And it was based on a series of books by a woman named Mary Norton, who many years later I came to know. But so in 1971, I read the script. I found out that it was about to be dumped on the open market by CBS, who at that time had a film division they were closing. So I joined with Charles Schultz and Associates, so the Charlie Brown guy, and Foot Cone Building, and we purchased the rights to it, and we did a Hallmark Hall of Fame, and that in 1973. Wow. And that was the first time The Borrowers had been done as it had Dame Judith Anderson in it. It had let's see, who were the other actors that were in it? I'm drawing a blank. But that was the biggest name in it.
Sure.
The rest were very good. And
Yeah.
it got great ratings, so great, in fact, they repeated it the next year on Hallmark. Then through the years, we struck up a deal with 20th Century Fox, and we were going to have a series based on it for CBS. We wrote scripts, didn't happen. Fast forward 25 years, and up comes Working Title Films out of England, who were interested in it. They came over, we talked. They wanted to make a television series based on it for the BBC.
Yeah.
And I had been trying to do that too, but I could never quite communicate properly with the BBC, but they could. So we had a series on the BBC. A series in England is like 6 to 10 episodes.
Sure.
That's the series, period, it ends.
Okay.
Well, they did what they call 2 series
Okay.
based on the books. They were eventually shown over here on TNT, but they were not as popular here as they.
I see.
The Borrowers in England is like a great tradition.
Right.
Every family wants to go see it.
Right.
Or wants to watch it on television. So it turned out very well. We then I got interest from various, because I now own the rights, I got interest from theater groups all through England.
Wow.
Who wanted to do stage versions of it. So it's been playing in England in some little theater somewhere for the last 20 years, almost every year.
Oh, okay.
Working Title came back in the late 70s, no, I'm sorry, the late 80s, and wanted to make a motion picture. So we did The Borrowers, the movie, which is the one with John Goodman and Jim Broadbent, which is a great film.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you want to see a little piece of that, or maybe I should show you first the television special.
Let's
Just
yeah,
take a
and we
little
could-
bit of that.
We could do it chronologically.
Yeah.
But before we get into it, give us a little background on the plot and
Oh,
what's
the storyline.
Borrowers
Well,
all about?
The Borrowers, strangely enough, is about stealing, but we won't use that term. They borrow.
Yes.
In other words, this is a group of little people who live under the floorboard, who constantly take all those things that you're missing, like the extra sock that disappears.
Oh, okay, that's
and,
where it
and the
goes, okay.
needles and all that kind. Well, because what they do, they live on what human beings above them leave behind. They're not fairies. It's a real parallel world.
I see.
And they kind of ape the world above. It's also kind of a commentary on our world when seen through the eyes of these little people.
I see. I see.
And they have great adventures. And they live in this one particular house, and they are the only ones left. They don't know what's happened to everybody else. They know they left. They hope there's someone out there.
I see.
And what they want to do is get out of the house and see if they can find their relatives. And the whole plot basically is how they can get their freedom.
I see.
And is there anything to go to?
I see.
And that really is a basic story of the
Okay.
Borrowers.
Okay. So why
There's-
don't we look at the sort of the metamorphosis here?
Yeah, let's
of
start
the
with-
Borrowers,
let's start with
starting
the-
with
yeah.
first and what should we look
Eddie
for?
Albert played Pod, who is the lead in this
okay.
particular version.
Okay.
And the story here is pretty much the same.
I see.
It's still a basic story
Okay.
of them trying to get loose,
Okay.
trying to get away.
So let's see it transform. What should we look for in this first version?
Okay, well, the first thing is we shot the entire film in Toronto against
Okay.
blue screen,
Okay.
which means that we were building huge monoliths that they had to climb up and down because they're little people.
Sure.
So for example, when you see them in the film, they throw a fish hook on a staircase, pull themselves up to the next staircase, and that's how they get up to the top of the landing. Well, of course, in blue screen, that's huge blocks.
Sure.
And they're slowly going up.
Okay.
So the thing to look for is the balance between what is big and what is small, and how well how well that works.
Okay. Well, let's look at that.
That's what men are. Knocking things around and leaving the mess for whatever woman's handy. If you do your work. Ice again! There, did you see under the stove? Get a poker!
I set a trap there only last week.
Nasty things in the cupboards everywhere. And why didn't you clean up the mothballs that you spilt?
I never.
Where's the other half of the scissors? Oh, it's the limit.
I never seen no scissors, and I never made no mess with no moth.
Oh, no, you never. I'll tell you what else you never empty the ash pan.
What's that fearsome-looking thing?
What, tea not ready? Oh, this means war, woman. It's me and Mrs. Crampfurl at dawn. I sent him a card. Hey, it took a bit of doing to get this, huh?
Is that what took you so long? I could have swore I heard that. Pod, what's that all over your That's ash. You had to come down from under the stove.
Tut, don't scold, woman. It was just a little shortcut like.
A shortcut? Under the stove, a shortcut, ashes and hot coals? Pod, they was in the kitchen. You might have been seen. Why do you take such Oh, Pod. Aren't you something?
Now, don't worry, old girl. I wasn't seen. I've never been seen. I don't intend to be seen. This place is mine. No cats, no dogs. And what's humans there is, duck soup, you might say. None of the hazards of me wild youth. Well, where's Arietti? I've got something for her.
Well, she always is these days.
Welcome back to Local Legends, and I'm with Walt deFaria. Walt, in the transformation here of the borrowers, now we go to step number 2.
Which is really the movie.
Right.
Now the movie, the interesting thing about comparing the movie, now that you've seen a little shot of the other one, is how far we've come in terms of the technical world.
Sure.
This is a full-scale $60 million motion picture.
Wow.
And it was made totally in England. The craftsmanship, by the way, that they have there in terms of things like props, because to make the borrowers work, you have to have huge, oversized props.
Sure.
A toaster has to be twice the size of a normal
Sure.
person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some marvelous things in this that you're not supposed to pay attention to.
Sure.
And say, oh, isn't that a marvelous toaster? But rather just the fact that look at this little person next to what is a real toaster.
Sure.
And how they do that, of course, is believe it or not, they're still using blue screen.
Okay.
But they're also use computer stuff too.
Okay.
So it's a marvelous contrast. The stars of this one, of course, are John Goodman plays the villain, and Jim Broadbent plays the father of the borrowers,
Okay.
of the borrowers' family.
Wow. Okay. Well, let's take a look at this version.
Today, Potter's Apartments. Tomorrow, Pottersville.
Where do you think you're going? Dad told us not to budge.
Stop it, you little squirt. Now, are you going to help me or not?
Not.
Fine, I'll eat all the ice cream myself then.
Wait for me, Ashley. Don't climb so fast. Don't leave me behind.
I'm getting too old for this.
Dad catches Variety, I have nothing to do with this. This is a big mistake. Ariety!
What?
I'm gonna need a lot of ice cream, Ariety.
Look. A whole room full of winter.
Ariety, what are you doing?
Nothing.
What about the ice cream?
I'm sure it must be around here somewhere.
What's going on? What happened?
She made me do it. It's not my fault. Ugh.
Where is she?
In there.
She's in the freezer.
Is that bad?
I don't think it could get much worse. It just got worse. All right, here we go.
Dad, don't do it. No, Dad!
Take the battery, get back to your mother, and tell her not to worry, all right?
And continuing along with the borrowers.
Okay, well, it has two more bits of history, but I'll give you the first one.
Sure.
And that is Steve Tosh and I wrote an original musical
I
based on
remember
the
that,
borrowers.
yes.
And it's been shown in concert, I mean, in the sense of a workshop kind of concert. And then recently in Salinas, it was a full-scale production was put on by the Salt Shaker Theater.
Oh, yes.
And that was about a year or so ago. And here again, now the difference of trying to create the illusion of big and small.
Sure.
So in this particular production, the way we accomplished that really was to have two levels on the stage. One level had very large props, but everybody was the same size as the people down below. But the difference was the conceit was that you believed that they were smaller than the people below, with a couple of other tricks that they pulled on stage.
Right.
It's far more difficult to do it live.
Yes.
But I still think effective.
Okay.
And so here's a little clip from that particular production.
Okay, well, let's see that as well.
What do you think he's borrowed? I want to open it right away. Mary, not till your father gets home. Like Pod always says, human beings are for borrowers, and we mustn't spoil the surprise in showing us what he's borrowed from them.
Like bread is for butter, like steering's for rudder,
Like matches for fire, like pipes are for briar.
human beings are borrowers. Borrowers need the beans, for without 'em there's no telling where we'd be.
For you and you,
And me,
like honeybees for petals, like water is for kettles, like steam is for rice.
like scratchings for lice.
Human beings are for borrowers.
The borrowers need the beans, for without 'em there's a great complexity.
For you and you,
And me, we borrow the things they have plenty of. Their bits and their pieces make many of the things that we wouldn't have any of. Here inside the stairwell,
like thimbles we can cook in. Yes.
snuff boxes to store in.
Pill boxes we can dine on.
Yes.
Boats we sail away on. Like honeybees for prosy. Like mittens for small tots. Like clogs are for late ones.
Like minnows to bait some. Human beings are borrowers. Borrowers need the beans, for without 'em what a dreary life could be.
And you,
And we, they're big and unpredictable, dangerous, it's true. If they weren't here, we'd die of fear. I don't know what we'd do. Human beings are borrowers. Borrowers need the beans, for without 'em there'd be no midnight for me. For borrowers need the beans, for a borrower's life is meant to be.
Position, young man.
Oh, tease no more, Eustace.
Silence, Mr. C. Now, boy, I don't tolerate any foolishness, especially from the likes of you.
Hurry now, lad. Let's get out of this god-awful weather.
You heard him, boy, but wipe your feet before
before you come in.
I did, Mrs. Crabtree.
Don't argue now. Mind your manners. Move along upstairs and take a nap. You're still sickly, and your mother, God bless her rebellious soul, would want you to get better.
Yes, ma'am.
And finally, in our journey through the borrowers, we have one more.
The Bars has
stage.
the life of 9 cats.
Uh-huh.
Right now in England, with the BBC and Working Title again, we're developing a new series which should go into production in September.
Yes.
Actually, it'll be a motion picture for television as a pilot.
Yes.
It could or could not be a series. It just depends. But in these times, and in terms of what's happened in taste and a younger audience, it is an entirely different Borrowers. It still has the relationship to small to large.
Sure.
But it's kind of like Road Warriors meets Doctor Who.
Oh my goodness, okay.
So it's in a whole different kind of take, and hopefully will not turn off all those mothers who've been reading the Bars of their children since the 50s.
Right.
So we'll see how that happens, and someday when it's done, I'll show it to you.
Well, of course, we're at the Monterey County Office of Education here, and one of our big drives is to get young people to read. So let's nice and clear remind people the Borrowers is by
Mary Norton.
And it's available at Borders?
It's well, nowadays, I think you probably can order through Borders. It wouldn't be on the shelves anymore, but it's available totally because
so
you can still buy it.
Amazon or whatever.
Oh yeah, Amazon has got copies too.
Okay, now
and it's a great story. It's a great read. You know, it's kind of like it was the Harry Potter of its day.
Sure. Okay.
It just was a much more less witches and more make-believe.
Okay, now I have 3 grandchildren, the oldest of which, Coral, is 8, and she's into Nancy Drew.
Yeah.
Is that about the level?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
I can go out and immediately get the Borrowers.
I would say anywhere, if you're going to read it to somebody, they can be 6 or 5.
Okay,
if
that'll
you're
take
gonna,
care of the rest.
Yeah, and then if you're going to read it yourself, up till 10 years of age, I think you're interested.
Well, it sounds absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. It's a charming series of books. The woman was wonderful.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. You have a reputation in the community for being one of the most organized of directors. How do you go about, say you get an assignment and you're doing a show that you've always wanted to do, lead us through the process. How do you create?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is once you've read the material, assuming you've read the script, you've really got to break it down into the scenes, into the characters, and this is just homework, really. I mean, it's just taking the thing and writing out lists of how many people are in it, how many people are in each scene, how many songs are there. I've done primarily musicals, although I have done some other stuff, but it's mostly musicals. And to me, the thing that really works for me is to develop the schedule of rehearsal, because when you do that, it begins to pull together so many other elements of it. In other words, when should the costumers show up and take measurements? When should the costumes be ready? You know, when do you need the set? When do you need a floor plan so that you can actually rehearse? So you've got to start with something that gives you a basis for those kind of requests. And what I normally do is I'll take every show, take every song, map out which songs will be learned on what days. And usually, and it's normal, it's not something that I do alone, but the normal thing is you try and group all the singing up front. The reason for that is obvious. I mean, if they don't know the song, they can hardly know where to move. So you teach the songs, then you schedule the blocking, and then you schedule the choreography, and then you schedule when you put it all together. But that master schedule really triggers so many other facets of it.
Right.
And it depends upon, if you're just the director, fortunately, you only have to worry about some elements of it. If you're a director-producer, as I've done on occasion, then you have to worry about far more things. But you know, up early in the game, you may have read the script, you may have done a schedule, but you have to also have auditions. You have to bring actors in, or potential actors at least, to see whether they fit the roles. And that all is done way before a bit of rehearsal is ever done.
So your advice to young directors might be organized?
Be organized. I mean, to me, if you're not organized, what you do, you just make everybody very uncomfortable because they don't know what they're going to do tomorrow,
Sure.
and they don't know whether you know what you're going to do tomorrow. And one of the things you've got to really, I think, give them is the confidence that you know what you're talking about. The other thing I find that in scheduling these kind of things, there is no reason to bring an entire cast, let's say of 20, 30 people, have them sit in the room while you deal with one scene that doesn't involve them. So one of the bases of any scheduling I do is I schedule it out so that you only come if you're going to be involved. This is in the first 4 weeks. I mean, a typical show rehearses 6 to 7 weeks, depending upon the complexity of it. But you don't bring everybody in, except the first day you bring everybody in because you want to read the script with them. But after that, you break it down. Now, what that does is it makes people know that when they come, they're going to be used, and they're not just sitting in a room waiting for you to decide that it might be good to talk to them.
Absolutely. One of my favorite experiences of working with a mentor of mine years ago was Cole Weston. And I can remember watching one of Cole's rehearsals where he was a little bit displeased with what one of the leads was doing, and he was sitting in the back of the house, and he was outraged. And he ran to the front of the theater and said, it has to be done this way, and you have to feel. And suddenly the man started crying and going through these lines. And all of us that were in attendance, I was doing something, assistant stage manager or something, everybody, you could hear a pin drop when we suddenly realized that, my goodness, this is the ultimate method director actor. That doesn't sound like Walt deFaria's style.
That's what I do. No, I'll compliment publicly and criticize privately. Mostly by that I mean you go up to the actor and talk to them in a normal voice. You're not trying to whisper, but for me to, in a sense, embarrass an actor in front of everybody else and say you really suck is, I don't think, the way to go. It just isn't my particular style.
Sure. Well, in this particular production, when it was put together, it was stunning.
Oh, sure.
It was absolutely stunning.
Well, there is no one way.
Yeah, and it was obviously for Cole, that was his way. I'm sure you've got lots of anecdotes and lots of wonderful stories to tell us. Well, give us a few of your favorite community theater
Community
stories.
theater stories. No, you caught me flat-footed here. A good story, my Lord. Can we stop a minute?
Well, how about in your Hollywood days or some of the...
Oh, the Hollywood days.
Sure.
Well, that's a little more interesting. I mean, more easy to remember.
Yes.
My favorite of the fact is when I went down there about the second time, I was still trying to break in, and these producers that I had worked with up at Music Circus were very kind. They kind of took me in and sheltered me in. The producer said he was going to be out of town one night, and he asked me if I would take his wife to a party in Studio City, and I said sure, be delighted. So we arrive at this party, and it's it's a bunch of people of that particular time. I mean, one of the people I could, the people like Gene Raymond and Jeanette MacDonald. I mean, it's that era of stars.
Okay.
In fact, as Jeanette MacDonald had just gotten her contacts for the first time, and she was couldn't see anybody, but she was trying to explain it to us all. But the only good story that came out of this, let's see, there was a composer there who had written a show called Lil Abner. And he and I sat down, and we were sitting with our trays having a buffet and so on. He said, excuse me, he says, I've just got to go check something. I'll be right back. So I'm sat there forever, and eventually he comes back, and what he'd done was he'd called New York because the show had opened that night. He was trying to find out what the grosses were. But it was one of those kind of things that, for me, a wide-eyed kid who didn't know what he was doing, I was just to be in the neighborhood with all these people. There was also a marvelous composer who sat down at the piano, and he literally and actually said, and then I wrote, and would play.
Wow.
And then he would say, and then I wrote.
Wow.
We all walked away from him.
Very, very impressive. Some of your favorite local shows that you've done.
Here,
ones
locally?
that just work perfectly.
Well, the one, Oliver. I really enjoyed doing Oliver. I've done Oliver at the Outdoor Forest Theater twice. And And then my other favorite, believe it or not, is one that wasn't quite as successful in terms of audience, was Joseph the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which I thought was a great show.
The early Lloyd Webbers.
Yeah.
Well, you are now very actively involved in the Force Theater Foundation and have showed tremendous leadership in sticking with it as the renovation process begins on that jewel in Carmel. What's happening with that?
Well, basically, the foundation and it has been able to raise money to do the first step, which was called a pre-design. In other words, this is a facility that was built in 1910 and is, was rebuilt sort of in the 30s by the Works Progress Administration. Well, I guess we're going to have a new WPA soon.
That's right.
But at any rate, it has not had anything done to it of any note since about 1936. So we paid for an architect, a theatrical architect, not just any architect, to come up and look at it and give us a scheme for what can be done. And that's been taken to the City Council of Carmel. They've approved it, and they've now taken the project over and are at the point where this same architect is now doing the next step. So it looks like something might happen by 2010, we hope. But it's been a long fight. I don't know if you can imagine, or maybe you can, what it's like to deal with cities and city councils and the rest. And they, it isn't that they don't want to do what you want to do. It's simply that they just take time. They have their own method, their own calendar.
Usually with the best of intentions.
Oh, absolutely. And it just has been a very slow, it's like watching grass grow. But we think now we're at the point where if it weren't for the economy in its present condition, we would probably move even a little faster. It's not dead at all, and the city plans to do something, but whether we'll get the massive refixing that we envisioned at this time is perhaps debatable.
Yes. Walt, also very unfortunate, again, is the impact of the current fiscal response, crisis on the entire arts scene. And I know several theatrical companies, music houses, a lot of people are really feeling the pinch. Do you have any recommendations? What do you think is something that we're going to encounter in the next?
Well, I think one of the things is I think this audience will not have to ask themselves, do they want to spend $25, let's say, to see a play, or spend $20 with two people? $20 is for one ticket, or $20 for two tickets to go to a movie. If you notice, movie business is not suffering as much as anything else is. The good movies are making fortunes. I mean, they're really doing well. The theater audiences, I think, are beginning to thin a bit. And it may well be we'll get to the point where there'll have to be some kind of price adjustment during the period. What form that could take, because like in New York, there are at least 5 or 6 major shows closing. They've been there a while, and they've done very, very well. And over the Christmas holidays, a couple of them even did $1 million a week, but still are closing. January 11th, at least of 2009, major shows have closed. I mean, Hairspray is one. Spring Awakening. There's just a whole roster of shows.
Do you think this is a product of ticket prices? So if the prices were reduced, I know that for some, the senior rate, for example, is very, very reasonable.
Oh no,
for
absolutely.
Movies, as well as some of our theatrical houses.
But I think people think of theaters expensive. I mean, it's perception as much as actual price. Which means you have to work harder to convince them that to buy a ticket to the theater is not as expensive as it looks, and that's it's a hard sell. But no, I don't think it's just my price used to be $25, I'll make it $20, and that'll make a difference. I don't know if that's true. But you do have to sell harder, and make them feel that they are going to get real value for that money and real entertainment. And what's happening in the theater, which is one of the sad things perhaps, is that serious theater is really suffering. Because people don't. we're back in the Depression era.
Yes.
In terms of what was the big success. Well, Shirley Temple singing "Happy Days Are Here Again."
Right. Or gangster movies.
Or gangster movies,
Yes,
yeah. But not a true story. I mean, I don't know if you've seen a film like Revolutionary Road. Magnificent motion picture.
Yeah.
But it's such a downer. Yeah. And this is the problem. People simply, that's why musicals now are the big hits on Broadway, and the straight plays there's always an exception that proves the point.
Yes.
And it's the musical that makes it happen.
Yes.
But even they're suffering because of the cost of going to theater is very high.
Yes.
And as I say, it's not just price alone, but I think it's a factor.
Right. Walt deFaria, what do we have in the future? What can we look forward to?
Well, right now I'm working on a show called A Year with Frog and Toad, which was on Broadway. Got 3 Tony nominations.
Okay.
It's a very young show, so it didn't last very long on Broadway.
Sure.
And also this summer for the Theater Guild, I'm going to do Funny Girl.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Now tell me a little bit. This is at Monterey Peninsula College.
Oh yeah, A Year with Frog and Toad is at MPC Theater Company at the college.
Tell me a little bit about the plot. What's it?
There is no plot.
There is no plot.
No, A Year with Frog and Toad is really based on a series of wonderful children's books called Frog and Toad. It's not Wind in the Willows, as many people think.
So,
and it's basically, it just deals with friendship, what it means to have a friend and how to nurture that friend.
Okay, now are they actual frogs?
No, so it's going to be, it's mostly 90% adults in the playing frogs and toads, but they aren't dressed like frogs and toads.
Oh.
They might have a little element on their costume that lets you know who they are.
I think I'd prefer to be a frog. The toads.
Well, the toad looks very nice. Though.
It looks very nice. Okay.
And actually, frog and toad merely wear normal clothes, but their vests are the color of brown and green.
I see.
But the thing that makes it outstanding is the score. I mean, it's really one of the most fantastic scores. And adults who have to bring their children or who want to bring their children will have a ball because it's really quite well.
And this is opening?
It's opening in the first 3 weekends. It plays the first 3 weekends of March.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something definitely to look forward to.
Oh yeah, it's a charming show, and there's something in it for everybody. It may sound like it's a children's only, but it's not.
Okay, there's a family fair.
A family evening.
And hopefully the prices will be affordable by that time.
I hope so.
Yes, and then Funny Girl. Now, we don't normally see Funny Girl.
No, Funny Girl is one that, one of the big problems with Funny Girl is unless you have someone to play Fanny Bryce, you don't really want to do Funny Girl.
Yes.
The last time it was done here was at MPC.
That's kind of like doing Hamlet without a Hamlet.
Exactly,
Okay.
same idea.
Yes.
So it hasn't been seen in this community for quite a few years. And so we're fortunate to have somebody to play, play Fanny Bryce. And that'll play the last weekend of June and the first 3 weekends of July. So we go right into rehearsal on that one right after we finish Frog and Toad.
That's good. That's good. So you're staying active? And,
at the moment, God willing.
Yes. I understand that part. And you're also quite a bon vivant. And
a bon vivant, no less.
We always see and a clothes horse as probably the best dressed director in Monterey County. So, and Walt, I know that lots and lots of folks, including myself, hold you in dear esteem.
It's very nice of you to say.
And really applaud all of your efforts, and quite a leader in our community. Any farewell comments that you'd like to make?
No, just that, I just hope more and more young people think about the theater in every form, whether it's motion pictures, television, or the stage, not to be afraid to go try it, because there are some young kids especially who have some theatrical ability are often ridiculed in school, particularly in the grammar school areas. Middle school is tough on those kids. And you just have to encourage them and encourage their parents especially to let them have that chance, let them have the opportunity, because it's something that if they don't do it and you take it away from them, they'll regret it for the rest of their life. And so it takes a parent, a very understanding parent, to allow a young boy or girl who feels that all they want to do is sing and dance, to let them.
Absolutely. And this was explained to me one summer when I had the privilege to go back to Yale, which at that time was one of the best theater programs in the world. And Dr. Lloyd Richards told a group of high school directors, 15 of us that summer, that that youngster that you're referring to, the one that frequently acts out in class and does all the things that we don't want, almost genetically is compelled to do this, to tell the story of humanity.
Absolutely.
They need to be witnessed. They carry the gene inside of them of all of us, of all of our story. So, Walt, thank you for all that you've done, and thank you for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.